Too many leftovers. Had some enchiladas for dinner.
What is up, everybody? Jason, Joe, and Crams are here. And this is what you've all been waiting for. We've had a lot of requests for this one. We've been looking forward to doing it ourselves, but we wanted to wait and really use it to kick off the summer. We're going with the Beach Boys this week. I guess I'll hold back on my specific thoughts on the band. That will come to light soon enough. Pretty big discography, 29 albums. One of the biggest ones we've done since maybe Neil Young. I don't know if we've done another one that was this large. So we're going to get into it pretty quickly. There are a few things that we are not counting. We're not doing the smile sessions. We're just counting the official Smiley Smile album that was released. Basically, if you look at their Wikipedia, there's 29 studio albums listed, and those are the ones we're going with. So that's it. We may touch on some of the other odds and ends throughout our discussion, but just the 29. We're going to do the bottom 4 first, and then we're going to do 5 at a time until we get to the top 10, and then go one by one. As far as my familiarity, I think I've heard all of these except maybe a couple of the 80s ones that I never listened to before. So pretty familiar. So how about you guys?
Well, I'll start it off because I am the least enthusiastic of the Beach Boys of the three of us. That said, I still think they're amazing. That's just, you guys are super fans and knew a lot of these before me, but now that I've listened to all of them, I'm pretty much right there with you. They're great. Going into this, I probably would say the first album I heard was Beach Boys' Christmas album. Growing up as a kid, it was a big deal among my uncle. Really loved it. He loved all the Beach Boys stuff. Got into Pet Sounds and Sunflower in college, a big deal. Then kind of pieced together some, knew all the hits, had Endless Summer for a long time, had that on CD back in the day, I think. Maybe it was a cassette. Yeah, before we started this the other week, probably only knew 9 or 10 of the albums. Definitely nothing after Endless Summer, 73, 74, except for Summer in Paradise, which we nominated for the worst album of all time. But yeah, I am the weakest of the three, but still stronger than 99.9% of the population with my Beach Boys fandom, because they're great. Even when they're bad, it still usually sounds great, which is sort of a secret weapon of theirs. So yeah, big fan.
Well, I've been waiting for this all summer long, and I'm familiar with maybe 75% of these albums coming into this. There's a couple Stars and Stripes and some of the cover stuff I never had any interest in really listening to. Still down, but I had to for this job. And there's a couple 70s ones and 80s ones that I think I missed, but the most part, I was pretty familiar with the whole discography. I am a super fan, as Gramser succinctly put it, and a bunch of them made my top 5s in our Album of the Year series, including the only back-to-back winners in the history of my picks, which was Beach Boys Today and Pet Sounds in 65, 66. So I am a fan, and we'll get into more of that as we go through the list. But yes, I am a fan and I'm familiar.
Who's kicking us off? You want me to start?
Yeah, why don't you start?
Okay, so bottom 4, pretty easy for me to come up with these ones at the bottom. They kind of separate themselves, I think. 29 for me, 0 stars for Summer in Paradise. There's a reason it was on the March Madness tournament, and probably should have gone a little further, but it ran into the buzzsaw that was Corey Feldman, I think, in round 2, so couldn't go further. But man, it's terrible. The production is so bad. The drum samples are awful. You got Mike Love talk rapping. This is the only one I think that has 0 involvement from Brian Wilson, and it shows. John Stamos sings a version of Forever, which is just kind of heartbreaking because I love that song. I think it's a great love song sung by Dennis, and the remake here is just terrible. Yeah, so that's the bottom for me. Half a star up from that and 1 place up. Number 28, Still Cruisin'. This is a late 80s. It's basically a compilation. It's a bunch of songs that were in movies, soundtracks, except for a couple. Apparently the idea was to have all movie songs compiled onto a record, and then some political jostling between the band members, like Al Jardine wanted to get a song in there. So there ended up being a few originals. I hate the production on it. I think it sounds really bad. I do love Kokomo. That gets it the half star. But that's about it. Then 27, basically my bottom four, started in 1992 and worked backwards through the 80s. I've got the self-titled album, The Beach Boys. I've got this at 1 star. This is the first one they did after Dennis Wilson died. And this is basically like the worst 80s album by Chicago, but a little bit worse than that. So it's just like this really cheesy, bland songwriting, corny as hell, love songs, just not a fan of it. And then the album that kicked off the 80s from 1980, Keeping the Summer Alive. And they just kind of entered the 80s with a thud. This basically is the sound of them just surrendering to the fact that they're going to be a nostalgia act from now on. Really don't like it at all. There's like 100 million different musicians that play on this thing. There's a couple songs that were co-written by Randy Bachman. I don't know. It's just not very good. 1 star for that as well.
All right. We'll have Joe close it out. I got some different opinions about the 80s stuff. I'm not going to go overboard with it for sure. Number 29 for me is Stars and Stripes Volume 1. Just assumed that Summer in Paradise would be my dead last, but just the audacity to take some of the greatest songs ever written and just redo them in an entirely different style. It'd be cool if they did it country with like some just better country, but this is just crappy, overly slick, like late 80s, early 90s, way too pristine, takes all of the authenticity and feeling out of true country music. And this is just really bad. These are songs that just should never be touched. Some of the best songs ever. Number 28, Summer in Paradise. Both of these are 1 star, down at 29, 28. Yeah, Jason nailed it, and we talked a lot about it before. It's a masterclass in bad production and just utterly stupefying what some of the vision was for this album. 27, I've got Keeping the Summer Alive, 1.5 stars. Simply put, just sounds kind of goofy at times. Sounds like a Beach Boys cover band, but it's actually the Beach Boys, like Jason said, just surrendering to the fact that they're going to be a nostalgia act. They haven't evolved their songwriting like for a long time. Nothing's really memorable. It just falls pretty flat and lifeless. And number 26, we're moving up to 2 stars here. I've got 15 Big Ones, really stale. I feel like this is the first one after a lot of more creative stuff in the 70s where they were trying to do newer stuff. And then they were like, no, we need to go back to what we were doing in 64, 65, 66. But it just doesn't have that energy and youthful, blissful, summer ignorant or summer innocence that they had 15 years before, 10 years before. And, they just in those 10 years or whatever, it seems like they aged a lot by trying to do this album. So that is my number 26, 15 Big Ones at 2 stars.
Well, my list is pretty similar to both of yours. I think we're off to a good start. Maybe a combination of Jason Kramzer's. 29, I do have Summer in Paradise. It's a 0.5 star. It's just not any good. Can't say much else about it. I don't want to listen to it again ever. The fact that I've had to listen to it for worst album ever tournament and this is kind of cruel. 28, I got Still Cruisin'. Kokomo bumps it to 1 star. Kokomo is a great song. I will not hear any arguments to the contrary. 27, with Kramzer, I got Stars and Stripes Volume 1 from 96. It's a 1 star album, just wholly and completely unnecessary. It would be different if, any of the songs were better than the originals, but the fact that every single song is significantly worse than the original, and there's no real added, coolness to it. Terrible. My number 26 is going to be Keeping the Summer Alive. I'm going to go to 2 stars on this because it does have this adult contemporariness. I think courtesy of Randy Bachman on Keeping the Summer Alive, the song. And I kind of like Living with the Heartache. It's very cheesy and lame, but it's, like Jason says, like a Chicago tune. I kind of like the schmaltzy Chicago stuff from the 80s. It's not great. It's not a great album in any means, but 2 stars. for keeping the summer alive. So yeah, that's my bottom four. We're all pretty much together here. Nothing wild and just completely off the wall yet.
My number 25 is Stars and Stripes, Volume 1. I agree with you guys. I have it at a 1.5 stars. I actually think it's better than it should be. I mean, in concept, it should be 0 stars. I think it's somewhat listenable, but like you said, there's nothing that improves upon anything or really does anything interesting. It's exactly what you think it's going to be. My number 24 is 15 Big Ones. And I think Cram's description was pretty on the money. They really built it as like the Brian's Back album, but Brian really was not quite in the shape to really he's not back at full strength. And that's very apparent, like from the get-go. I think commercially it actually did okay. It charted better than some of the stuff before it, but I think it was really just the marketing and built the excitement around it and it sold, but the songs aren't really worthy of the fact that it sold better than the ones before it. 23, I have That's Why God Made the Radio. This was kind of a tough one to place. I am glad that this record got made. I think it sounds pretty good, and I'd rather have this be the final Beach Boys studio release than Stars and Stripes or Summer in Paradise or something like that. So I think this is a better note to go out on, but I think a lot of the songs on this are still really, really cheesy, really schmaltzy, overly clean, overly produced. And I think it's so overly produced because maybe, they're covering up some, deteriorating ability perhaps. But yeah, I don't love it. 2 stars for that one. Number 22, I have Beach Boys Love You, which is a record that has a bit of a cult following. There are some people that really like this record. I think it's really, really bizarre. There's some cool stuff about it. Some of the synth stuff is really cool. There's some catchy and memorable moments, but man, the lyrics on this thing are just absolutely ridiculous. Johnny Carson is really weird that is a song. Honking down the gosh darn highway. And of course, my favorite, pat her on the butt. Just really weird. Apparently, this is the one that Brian made. He started as a solo project with Dr. Landy kind of supervising and pushing him to record music. And I read stories about him standing over Brian with a baseball bat to just get him to do the work, and just I don't know. I guess I can see why it's fascinating and why it might have its fans. It's kind of an interesting little oddity, but I can't place it any higher than that, although it's looking like Joe maybe did. My number 21, up to 2.5 stars, I have MIU album, which stands for Maharishi International University. Carl and Dennis, not a big part of this one, and it was recorded at the Maharishi International University in Fairfield, Iowa. A lot of this kind of reminds me of 15 Big Ones. It's kind of them kind of doing the past, redoing what they used to do, but not doing it very well. There's some really bad moments on here, like Hey Little Tomboy is one of the worst Beach Boys songs ever, I think. It's really terrible. But in the 2 moments that Carl and Brian do show up, I think they hit home runs. Their 2 tracks on this record are fantastic. And the reason that I put it ahead of things like 15 Big Ones, Carl, great vocal on Sweet Sunday Kind of Love, and My Diane by Dennis is great. I love both of those songs. The rest of the album, not so much.
Well, if those 2 songs are home runs, you're playing on a T-ball field, my friend. So my number 25 is going to be MIU. Yeah, it does remind me of 15 Big Ones, trying to relive the past. It's cool if you want to do throwback at this point in your career, but you got to put a spin on it. You got to update it, or it has to be so old that it's fresh again. This is none of that. 2 stars for that. Number 24, Beach Boys Love You. Fascinating for sure. Still 2 stars. The biggest problem I have is that the production and the songwriting / lyrics don't match at all. That's my biggest problem with it. It sounds like the album should have completely different lyrics and singers, and it sounds like they're collaborating with a band that we don't know who it is. It's just totally bizarre to me. It does have those cool, dark, reverbing, carnival, deep synth sounds, A lot of the songs aren't that bad. The ones you did mention are pretty bad, like Johnny Carson. I actually think Roller Skating Child is really good, but there's just too much disconnect between the songwriting and the production. And yeah, just some of the most cringeworthy lyrics they've ever done. Number 23 is where I've got That's Why God Made the Radio, and I'm going up to 2.5 stars. Yeah. Far from their best material, much better note to go out on. Good, simple songs at times, kind of classic Beach Boys hooks. Yeah, maybe their worst album for performance sakes. Some of it gets stuck in your head. Nothing glaringly bad for me, so I think 2.5 is perfect. Number 22, this is probably going to be the lowest one on the list that I would imagine most people have higher, but I just found it incredibly redundant and the worst of an era. I've got Little Deuce Coupe at number 22, 2.5 stars, a lot of recycled stuff. At this point in their timeline, just kind of sick about hearing songs about cars, which is a lot of this album. So that has a strike against it. Even though Be True to Your School is awesome, I don't think there's much standing out here, and the best songs were already on other albums. And then number 21, I've got the self-titled at 2.5 stars. These 80s albums kind of work for me for some reason. I get all of the criticism behind it, but I'd be lying if I didn't say that, they were kind of fun, sappy, cheesy in the 60s and it worked. Doesn't work nearly as well here, but it still works on a different level. Middle-aged, yuppie, 80s daiquiri-soaked, sunbathing vibes. It's just entertaining. I've always liked this drum sound. I know Jason hates it. But I dig it. And I mean, just listen to the keys and the guitar on the song. Maybe I don't know. It's so over the top, so overproduced. It's everything you would want in a Beach Boys 80s album. It sounds exactly like what a Beach Boys 80s album should be. So yeah, number 21, the Beach Boys, self-titled, 2.5 stars.
Other than one giant discrepancy in our rankings, I'm right there with you guys. My number 25 is going to be the Beach Boys, 1985, self-titled. It's cheesy. The synths are cheesy. The vocals are cheesy. The arrangements are cheesy. The lyrics are cheesy. But all that cheese kind of adds up to a big old tasty cheese ball. I like it. I don't love it, but it's fun. I can imagine your unhip 80s parents listening to it and really just digging it. So 2.5 stars for that. 24, I got 15 Big Ones from 1976. A lot of covers on this one. They don't thrill me. The originals don't really thrill me. This was kind of a fallow era for the band. And this one, just nothing great. Kind of like a thinly veiled attempt to get back to their sunny California ways, like Ramser said. Number 23, from the same era, I got MIU. It's a little too schmaltzy. Dennis has some good stuff. This was sort of a good era for him. He really came alive in the 70s, but even these songs aren't his best work. So it's 2.5 stars. And number 22, I got That's Why God Made the Radio, their last from 2012. I have it at 3 stars. It's schmaltzy. The production is less sort of glossy. It's still pretty glossy, but it's less sort of cloying. And I think the last 3 songs, From There to Back Again, Pacific Coast Highway, and Summer's Gone, are legitimately good, touching, and an excellent way to close out their career. And the harmonies are good. They're probably, synthesized in a studio control room somewhere for the most part, but they sound pretty good. The computers are getting better at sort of bringing that sound from the past. And finally, number 21, I got Surfin' Safari. It's cute, playing's fine, singing is good, but it's so many novelty tunes, 10 Little Indians, Chug-a-Lug, County Fair. I just can't do it. 409 and Surfing Safari are good, but it's about it. It gets a bonus half star for being a historical document. And it is 1962, so you can't expect too much, but it's just not one that I'm going to listen to again.
All right. So we've been on the same page mostly up until now. But Beach Boys fans, this is where you got to buckle in. It's about to get a little bumpy. My next 5 is going to be a little bit of a rough ride, but I promise it gets better after this. My number 20 is the Beach Boys Christmas album. 3 stars. It's really good. And for a Christmas album, it's great. But yeah, it's a Christmas album. I couldn't really justify putting it much higher than that. My number 19 is what I consider the most overrated Beach Boys album. I believe it made the Rolling Stone Top 500 albums of all time, the most recent one, I think, and it is Wild Honey. This is their kind of like R&B, pop, soul record, or at least that's what people always say it is. There's not really only a few tracks that are kind of like that. Then there's some other like kind of like Smile era tunes, I think, that they brought back. To me, all of the songs are so short. They come and go. They don't really leave much of a mark. It's a good record. I have it at 3 stars, but it's so like scattershot. And I don't think it's that cohesive. Like it's supposed to be like this R&B record, but there's some R&B tracks, but like some of it's like bedroom pop, a little lo-fi, and it doesn't really all work together. And I don't find it that memorable at all. So 19 for me. 18, I'm with Joe on Surfing Safari. It's cool, it's fun, but yeah, too many little novelty tracks. And also I think the production at this point is just, studio technology hasn't really developed fully. So it's their worst sounding record of their early records, I would say. Then 17, I have Smiley Smile, which I have a similar issue with this as I do Wild Honey. The songs are just kind of like scraps. They feel like they're not really fleshed out or completed, and it seems like all thrown together. The opening track of each side of the record is amazing, Heroes and Villains, and Good Vibrations, little like symphonic pop masterpieces, but the rest of it, I'm not crazy about. I have this one at 3 stars also. And as far as the Smile sessions in general go, I will say that I am not as into them as everybody else seems to be. I've listened to them. I mean, I don't know. I don't really get it that much. I don't get why everyone loves it. Even the tracks from those sessions that later turn up on other albums like 2020 and stuff like that, they always feel like the worst songs on the record to me. So Smiley Smile at 17. And then my number 16 is going to be Surfing USA, which I think is a step up from Surfing Safari. I think it's a better showcase of their vocal abilities, especially. They started double tracking vocals on this record. There's a lot of cool surf instrumentals, which is kind of cool for them. Miserloo, Surf Jam, Stoked. So that stuff's all pretty cool, but it's not great Beach Boys stuff. The Lonely Sea, I think, is a really good precursor to tracks like Surfer Girl and In My Room. So it's cool. It's got some good stuff on it, 3 stars, but yeah, definitely they get better soon after that.
All right. Oh man, Wild Honey that low really cuts me deep. You got a problem with these short songs, but Randy Newman tells jokes about cities for 45 seconds and you do a damn cartwheel. So I don't know. It doesn't make any sense to me. All right. Number 20, I've got, this will probably be in Jason's top 5 because it's a 70s sounding album, LA Light, 2.5 stars. Not great for sure. Follows up MIU with all the things that I had problems with MIU, but as a step up because they do kind of twist their old sound a little bit. And, I think Good Timing and Lady Linda are really good updates to their classic sound. It's got a little too much of like that whimsical Anne Murray style sound to me with the violins and stuff, and some too easy breezy yacht rock like Christopher Cross vibes for me. If they're gonna do the yacht rock vibe, I want the cheesy production of the 80s with Kokomo and pina coladas and all that stuff. Number 19 for me is gonna be Holland, 2.5 stars. This doesn't sound like a Beach Boys album to me. It sounds like a 70s singer-songwriter style album. Kind of uninteresting to me. Everything's in a similar tempo pretty much all the way through, especially in the first half. I hate Sail Long Sailor. The rhyming and the pattern that he sings it is just really lame. It bugs the hell out of me. Number 18, in a similar vein, I've got Friends, 2.5 stars. Would probably think these were better albums if they weren't called Beach Boys albums. I know you guys love this because it sounds like a wannabe Paul McCartney, Granny Rock wannabe singer-songwriter album. I don't know. I just find it pretty uninteresting. Really doesn't click. Quite boring. Second half is far better than the first one. I like Annalie the Healer a good bit. Busy Doing Nothing is pretty good, but it feels a lot longer than it is. I've got Beach Boys Christmas at number 17. 3 stars for that. We're in 3-star territory. Yeah, I mean, Christmas album's never going to knock me, to sleep, but this one, or knock me out of the park. It's never going to be good. Terrible analogies left and right, but yeah, for a Christmas album, pretty darn good. Number 16, this is where I got it. Still Cruising, 3 stars, baby. Don't let anyone tell you different. Have a good fruity ice cold smoothie drink and relax on the beach and put this on and you will be transported. Well, you're already on the beach, but so you don't have to get transported anywhere. But I can't lie, I love the super cheese. I have fun with these albums. Delightfully overproduced, doubled down on those sappy island getaway vibes, and I dig it. I think that's when they're at their best, when they're not trying too hard, and they don't on this one, that's for sure.
I had a lot of hope for this ranking, but that just went out the window with those 2 5 records. So, man, I am in stark disagreement on some of those. Others, not so much. My number 20 is going to be Little Deuce Coupe. Plenty fun. It's a car concept album. So everything's about cars. Real big break from their surf concept albums previously. Little Deuce Coupe, Be True to Your School, 4-9, all pretty good. I think Brian Wilson's falsetto sounds really great on this album, especially on Spirit of America, which is a throwaway song, but he sounds great on it. Number 19, I got Beach Boys Party. The live in studio setting doesn't really work for me, but it's still fun. It's 3.5 stars. The covers are good. I think they're well picked, but I don't like the chatter, the distracting, like little mumbly vocals behind all of it. I think I'd much rather see them attempt this with like the full power of a studio and actually good recordings, stuff like that. Number 18, I got Surfing USA. I think it's a big step forward from Surfing Safari. The double track vocals sound great. You can see hints of them exploring a little bit. It's still pretty much basically in their wheelhouse, but it's definitely better. 3.5 stars for that. Number 17, I got the Beach Boys Christmas album, the best Christmas album, at least of popular music probably ever made. I think I can't think of anything better. And I think the songs are surprisingly like complex, at least more so than probably what they were working with. And it's not bad. It's 3.5 stars. It's one of the few Christmas albums that I will actually listen all the way through. Number 16, I'm with Jason on this, Smiley Smile. Take out Heroes and Villains in Good Vibrations, and it's basically a 1-2 star album maybe. I hate vegetables. So many gimmicky tunes in here. Really irks me. But Good Vibrations and Heroes and Villains are phenomenal. So bumps it up to 3.5 for that one.
All right. Yeah. Whew. I thought I was crazy, but then Cram puts Still Cruising ahead of Friends and
all day long.
Holland and Friends. You got Still Cruising above those records. All right. My number 15, I've got Shutdown Volume 2. I think there's just a lot of kind of filler on this record. The Denny's drums at the end, Cashless Love versus Sonny Wilson, cover of Louie Louie. It just seems really patched together, even more so than some of their other patched together early records. But the good stuff is amazing. Don't Worry Baby, Warmth of the Sun, Keep an Eye on Summer, all fantastic. So 3 stars for me on that one. Number 14, I have Beach Boys 2020. Kind of a weird, dark time for the band. Their popularity is declining. They were losing a lot of money. This is when Charles Manson is kind of hanging around as well. Brian's like producing tracks for him. Dennis is friends with him. He actually has a track that he wrote on this album. Kind of a weird time. So I think the record's just a little inconsistent. There's some really good stuff on it, but also some weird stuff. I love I Can Hear Music, really good from Carl. Be With Me is a really nice Dennis tune. I think Dennis is really underrated, especially in the later years. Do It Again is good, but not every track really hits. It's a little spotty, but I got it at 3.5 stars, so we're moving up a little there. At number 13, Number 19, I had Wild Honey, which I said is the most overrated. And my number 13 pick is what I think is the most underrated. Cram called it. I don't have it in my top 5, but I do really, really like it. I've got LA Light Album. So this is their last record of the 70s. Really smooth late 70s production, kind of that yacht rock kind of thing going on. There's a couple really, really terrible songs on this record. The 11-minute disco, Here Comes the Night, is so bad. And then the closing track, Shorten and Bread, doesn't fit in at all. I don't know why they tried to put that on there. If you take those out, it might be in my top 5 because I love the rest of it. All Carl and Dennis, and their vocal performances on this are great. Just really like full of feeling and aching. And I just love their vocals on this record. Full Sail is great. Angel Come Home, Love Surround Me. Baby Blue is really good, Going South. So I don't really get why I've seen a lot of people rank this like bottom 5, but I really don't think it deserves that. 3.5 stars from me. My number 12 is going to be Summer Days and Summer Nights. So Today was a commercial disappointment, the record before it, which was Brian sort of spreading his wings a little bit in the studio and getting a little more complex. Great record, but didn't sell well, so the label kind of wanted them to go back to what they were doing before, and they do that. It feels like a bit of a retreat. The second half is pretty strong, but the first half is rough. Girl from New York City, Amusement Parks USA, and Salt Lake City, 3 of the first 4 tracks, and I think they are like 3 of the worst early Beach Boys songs. But it does get better. You get another version of Help Me Rhonda, which was also on Today. California Girls, Let 'Em Run Wild is really good. You're So Good to Me is great. It's just that rough start. Would be higher otherwise, but I got it at 3.5 stars. And then my number 11 is Little Deuce Coupe. Like Cram said, there are some retreads here, some songs that were on previous albums. I think there's actually 4 songs on this record that were appeared earlier, but I like all of the songs that reappear, and I think the rest of the record is good too, and not quite as much of that like obvious filler that Shutdown Volume 2 had on it. They stick to the car theme here pretty much throughout. It works. Ballad of Old Betsy I like a lot. Car Crazy Cutie, Spirit of America, A Young Man Is Gone, all really good. So I have it at 3.5.
All right. My number 15, I'm still at 3 stars here. I've got Surfer Girl. I like all these early Beach Boys albums. It's like perfect pop. So really what it comes down to with these batches of albums is how many songs do I really like? Because they all kind of blend in. I mean, there are definitely differences. Surfer Girl, I like a pretty good bit. Full of really good, just like sweetheart, school dance kind of sounds to it. A lot of puppy love. Then it starts to rock a little bit more in the end. In My Room is great. Number 14, 3 stars for Beach Boys Party. I like the live party chatter. I think it's pretty cool. I think it's like makes it seem like in its place of the 60s because everyone is caught on a live mic, but somehow still on like their best kind of proper behavior and really innocent jokes and playful family banter. Covers are, like Joe said, a really good pick. And aside from that, I just kind of like the stripped down, like kind of sounds like they're just jamming as a group, like with acoustic guitars and stuff at like a campfire on the beach at night. Pretty cool. Probably the one that could climb higher on my list, although I've listened to it a decent bit. Number 13, I've got Surfin' Safari. It's very charming, very cute, sounds great, obviously. I like the rendition of Summertime Blues a good bit. Number 12, I think the most underrated album, and I know in retrospect it's starting to get more good reviews than when it came out. I'm going with Smiley Smile here. 3 stars. Vegetable, I wouldn't say it's a good song, but it sure as hell is interesting to me. Very bizarre. I don't want to say it's ahead of its time, but I do think it probably is more influential as like sort of a more experimental album than people realize. And not just on an album on its own, but these like hugely popular, easygoing pop artists are showing that, yeah, we kind of want to do something a little more interesting, which, Beach Boys were one of the first acts to really get into experimentation. And this shows, especially with stuff like Fall Breaks and Back in Winter and stuff like that. And then one I really want in the top 10 because I think it's darn good. 3 stars. Number 11, I've got Carl and the Passions Play Tough. New lineup, kind of more rock and sound. This one has a very obvious increase in the bass and drums kind of thumping along with this one, especially in conjunction with piano and the organ. Here She Comes is really good. California sound by here is pretty much ditched almost entirely. Songs are longer. It's more jamming. I think it's fun, but I think, I don't think they're as good as some of the other acts that they're kind of emulating right now around this time. Country and blues vibes, pretty enjoyable. It's just not what I quite want with my Beach Boys, and that will probably always be a theme with the Beach Boys. Once you hear Pet Sounds, if you're going in timeline, you want everything after that is going to be compared to it. So it's a blessing, not a curse, though. So number 11, Carl and the Passions Play Tough.
Well, I knew that one was going to make Jason's top 10. It just seems like a Jason record. But what about mine? My number 15 is going to be LA Light Album. I kind of agree with Jason on this. I think it's underrated. I think Good Timin' is a nice piece of white soul. I think Carl and Dennis's work on here, some of their best, but Here Comes the Night, 10-minute disco. And the original is great. So I don't know why they decided they had to turn it into a 10-hour, or feels like 10 hours, 10-minute disco song. But Baby Blue, Love Surrounds Me. Carl sounds great on this. Dennis sounds great. But yeah, there's just a couple weird ones, and like Sumahama and Lady Linda from Al and Mike Love doesn't really match the rest of the output. And Short Inbred's pretty lame too, so it's flawed, but I got it 3.5 stars. Number 14, and we're at 4 stars now. I got Surfer Girl, great fun album. Surfer Girl, In My Room, both fantastic. Sort of, I think their best early, sort of, pre Brian Wilson taking the reins album. It just sounds really good. It's just nice, fun, sunny pop. Number 13, I got Shut Down Volume 2. Like Jason, it's got just too much filler, but I think Don't Worry Baby is their first full-on masterpiece. It's still in the Cars, Girls, Surf period of the Beach Boys, but it's trying to branch out a little bit. I think Brian's vocals are really good, and they're kind of starting to get even better, especially on Don't Worry Baby. There's this nice hint of sadness and worry underneath it. And then something like The Warmth of the Sun is a little more complex and shows that, the band could break out from their surf rock into something a little more deep and complex. Number 12, I wanted to put this in the top 10. It is Carl and the Passions, So Tough. I think it's great, 4 stars. I like the addition of Blondie Chaplin and Ricky Fattar. They're here for this one in Holland, and that's it. And stylistically, it's kind of similar to Sunflower and Surf's Up, but Fattar and Chaplin just don't seem to be integrated fully into the band. Their 2 cuts are basically just them. There's not a lot of backing vocals from the rest of the Beach Boys. Got a little touch of AOR in it. But I think the songwriting is pretty much solid throughout. Marcella's cool. Hold On Dear Brother sounds like the band. It's got the lap steel guitar, a little rootsier, and that's a Fattar and Chaplin song. So they kind of brought a different element to the band, which I like. And then Dennis Wilson has 2 great songs with Make It Good and Cuddle Up. Really awesome. But I like some more different albums, a little bit better. It's still 4 stars. I think it's really good, really underrated. Number 11, just outside the top 10, it's going to be Friends. It's tough between this and those weird albums between Pet Sounds and kind of when they rebirthed with Sunflower. Friends, Wild Honey, and 2020 are all basically interchangeable. I kept shuffling them around because I think they're all good and they all have their really good high points. I think the track Friends is really good on here. I think Little Bird really shows Dennis Wilson blossoming into a really good songwriter. And I like his rougher vocals. It's easy to pick out. Sometimes I can't tell who's who. I guess by now, if you're listening to every single album, I pretty much know who's singing on who, but Dennis is definitely the most easy to identify, other than maybe Brian, because he's a little rougher, little dirtier, a little sort of just not quite as clean and pretty. And it's a nice kind of counterpoint to the beautiful, perfect harmonies. The production is a little lo-fi. It's not quite lo-fi. I kind of see where Crams are saying with like the Paul McCartney just make an album in his bedroom. But this is 68, so it's kind of before McCartney got into that world. But yeah, the album's a little too short. It's like 25 minutes and has an instrumental and then transcendental meditation to end it. Kind of holds it back from being like a really great album, but 4 stars for Friends. So just missing the top 10. I think it's quite good.
Why did I say Carl and the Passions play tough instead of so tough?
I don't know.
Yeah, I literally have play tough written down.
I mean, you should always play tough.
Carl knew that. He was passionate.
My number 10 is going to be Live at a Beach Boys Party. To me, it's really interesting and kind of weird that this is the record that immediately precedes Pet Sounds, because I don't think there could be a starker contrast between 2 Beach Boys records than those two. It's kind of funny that it turned out that way, but I really love the feel of it, the atmosphere, the looseness of it. I love it. I remember hearing Barbara Ann on the radio as a kid, and the part where they kind of like break and laugh a little in the second verse, I was like, what is this? Like, you can do that? You can just like laugh in the middle of the song and like keep it in there. And just kind of always been fascinated by the sound of this record. And there's artists that have kind of like paid homage to it and done their own version of it, and every time I love it. Like, something about it, I just think it's really cool. Would probably be higher if it was this exact thing with original songs. The fact that it's like all covers holds it down a little bit, but I love it. I think it's really fun and a really enjoyable listen.
It's tricky because you don't want to do originals with that sort of version, because I don't think you're doing your originals justice there. So it almost has to be covers, but I kind of get what you're saying. All right, my number 10, and we are at 3.5 stars now. I've got Shutdown Volume 2. I agree that there's some filler on here. Probably not quite as much as you guys, but I think there's just too many amazing songs on here for it not to be top 10. Fun. Joe's right. Don't Worry, Baby is just one of the greatest songs of all time and one of their monumental leaps in the quality of the writing. Warmth of the Sun is great. Why Do Fools Fall in Love? Kind of like their version of Louie Louie. I don't mind Denny's drums in there. I don't think it's a good closer, that's for sure. But I think the heights of this album just it's got to be a top 10 essential Beach Boys album. And it's nice and quick and short. It's like 27 minutes or something like that. So, the filler thing doesn't cause a problem for me with an album that short. And yeah, like I said, those tracks I mentioned are just, where it almost doesn't matter what the other songs on the album are, especially for 1964. Like, song like Don't Worry Baby coming out in 1964 would have just blown me away, and it still does in 2021. So number 10, 3.5 stars, Shutdown Volume 2.
Alrighty then, I got my number 10, 4 stars, Wild Honey from 1967. This is kind of where Brian was out to lunch, went a little crazy after abandoning the Smile sessions, turned into Smiley Smile. But he still managed, him and Mike Love, to write every track on here pretty much. So still impressive, but takes a little bit of step back. Carl Wilson kind of becomes the band leader at this point, gets more lead vocals. Wild Honey got that little touch of R&B in there. And they back that up again with their cover up I Was Made to Love Her, which not quite as good as the Stevie Wonder version, but I think Carl gives it his all. Second half's really great. Darlin', I'd Love Just Wants to See You are great. I think, the harmonies on a throwaway track like Country Air and Mama Says, like they're this little lightweight, 2-minute songs, but just sounds amazing what they can do. The only track on here that isn't great really is How She Boogalooed It, which doesn't fit thematically or at all. So other than that, pretty great. Here Comes the Night is very cool. Really interesting chorus, not the disco version. This is the real version. The chorus has these really strange chords. Well, the verse is really simple, kind of backwards. And I think Brian comes alive with Here Comes the Night and Let the Wind Blow, and those are great. Slightly better than Friends, but between it, Friends, and 2020, they're all kind of in the same grouping, and I had them shuffled around the whole time. So just by chance, I had this one slightly higher in the end. So yeah, number 10, Wild Honey.
Okay, number 9 is one that I think will probably be top 3 for Joe. I've got Surf's Up at number 9, which has a lot of really great songs on it. I love Long Promised Road. Disney Girls is one of my favorite Bruce Johnston songs, but it like never gets going. Like the way it's sequenced, it's like every 3 tracks or so, there's a song I don't like. So it never really like hits its stride, really. Take a Load Off Your Feet. You get the great songs at the beginning of the record, then you get that. Then you get Student Demonstration Time, which is really rough, just a really, really bad kind of rocker that doesn't work at all. And I don't really care for A Day in the Life of a Tree that much either. I don't really get that one, but everything else on it's really good. It's just, I don't know if they were cut or even if they were all just like pushed to the back of the record, I might like it more. It's just the fact that like sequentially it never really gets rolling. There's never more than like 2 songs in a row that I'm really into.
My number 9 is also Surf's Up. I don't bet this is in Joe's top 3. I think it's probably a little too political for that, but I could be wrong. It 3.5 stars for me. Always kind of indifferent if I like kind of the style of this era of albums where it's kind of like each of them taking a turn with like the lead vocals. You don't get the old sweet harmonies like you used to when the driving force. It feels like this is just like one big singer-songwriter album at times, and everyone's kind of taking their turn. But it's still really good. 3.5 stars right off the bat. You get Don't Drink Water, joining Neil Young in that environmentalism crusade, really nice. Or Don't Go Near the Water, excuse me. Long Promised Road is good, but I'm pretty much exactly with Jason here. Never really works in its entirety because of those clunkers, like Take a Load Off Your Feet. Disney Girls is cool. Student Demonstration is not a song for the Beach Boys. They don't have the vigor and the anger and like the political angst to pull this off. They're trying like these heavy guitars and like this protest vibe, and then the boyish voice comes in and it doesn't work. It falls flat. I'm sure they care about these issues, but I just don't think they're the flag waving kind of. They're just not that group. It's cool that they tried something else, but it didn't work. I like Looking for Tomorrow. I like that vibe. And yeah, I'm also with Jason. A Day in the Life of a Tree doesn't really work for me at all. But overall, I think other than those problems in those couple of songs, the ones that do work pretty darn well. So 3.5 stars. Surf's Up, number 9.
3.5 stars. My number 9 is going to be an album neither of you liked. I thought this would be in Jason's top 10 because it's just so delightfully weird. I got Beach Boys' Love You, number 9. Everything's written by Brian Wilson here. And he's obviously like not totally there mentally. Like it kind of seems like he's kind of trying to reach back into like the childhood or teenage years. And it's just really weird, but it's so catchy. It sounds like nothing else I don't think I've ever heard. You got like the weird, Cramder said when he was talking about the album, like that darker, fuzzy, buzzy synth. It's almost like pre-synth pop. So it's this weird juxtaposition of like these really youthful vocals, like that kind of darker synth pop. So there's like, innocence and darkness. And it's just like an interesting look into Brian Wilson's psyche at this time. Because before this, you had Dennis Wilson contributing tracks and Carl Wilson. So this one's, definitely weirder, definitely Brian Wilson-y. So I guess I can see why people wouldn't like this one. But I just think it's so much more interesting than the other 70s albums from this period, LA or MIU. And, I like the novelty songs. I think Johnny Carson is really catchy despite its ridiculous lyrics. Even, Johnny Carson, Ding Dang, Solar System, all deeply weird songs, but they're incredibly catchy, and no one else could have ever made those songs. Even Brian Wilson's voice, it sounds like he's like 60 years old. Like it's darker, lower, grittier. Like he barely busts out that angelic falsetto. So it's so weird, but I immediately gravitated toward it when I heard it. Even Honking Down the Highway. It's just so ridiculous of a title. Just saying Honking Down the Highway kind of makes me laugh, but it's catchy. I like it. I like every track on here. I don't think there's any real stinkers. And just an interesting look into Brian Wilson in the late 70s. So I got a number 9, 4 stars for Love You.
Well, I agree that no one else could have made that record except Brian Wilson, but I would even go a step further and say that record could not have been made by anyone except for Brian Wilson in that exact like year that he made it. Like it's definitely a product of whatever he was going through with his like mental rehabilitation or whatever. My number 8 is going to be Friends, which I think is a really cool record. I think I forgot to say my star ratings, but the previous ones were all 3.5s. This is my first 4-star. Generally considered one of their better records, I think, by most people. And I think it's really good. I think the most striking thing about it is how stripped down it is. It's almost kind of like folky in a way. The thing that maybe holds it down from like top 5 is the fact that the songs, like on Wild Honey, just kind of come in and then they're gone. They don't really like leave you with much. They're like these quick little song fragments almost. But I do think that these song fragments work better than what's on Wild Honey. A lot of it's really catchy and beautiful. But I will say, like, for a 4-star record that I have placed this high, there's like not a standout track on it for me, except maybe Little Bird is maybe the one that would be my favorite. But yeah, it's a really cool record, kind of sweet and kind of simple.
Yeah, I think that's why I had it too low. I think it's too simple and doesn't have any of my favorite thing. Like if I made a list of my 5 favorite Beach Boys elements, they're not on this album. So that's why it kind of dips for me. All right, my number 8 is going to be at 3.5 stars, and it is going to be Beach Boys Today. Great pop record, really good. When I Grew Up to Be a Man is great. Great lyrics. Love the harpsichord or accordion, maybe harmonica at the end. I don't know what it is, but always just these nice little magical touches. Help Me Rhonda is great. Chorus is just so catchy. Please Let Me Wonder is lovely. Gets a little bit too slow and drowsy at the end of the album for me, and kind of just the fun dissipates out of nowhere for me. It's like She Knows Me Too Well in the back of my mind. But overall, I think it's them in that peak era where they couldn't really do any wrong. There's definitely nothing bad about this album. It just doesn't have quite those creative masterpieces that they're capable of. Like if this had Don't Worry Baby on it or something like that, it would be just relentlessly awesome. Help Me Rhonda is a really good hit, but it's not my favorite for sure. And it just probably just is over too quick. A lot of these early albums, I'm like really digging the vibe. Luckily, there's 4 in a year, so you can just put on the next one. But really, just like some of them just end before, the whole album ends before some Rush song ends. So it's tough. So number 8 for me, 3.5 stars, The Beach Boys Today.
My number 8 is going to be 2020. Really cool album. Very kind of disjointed. A lot of different players all getting their tunes in. There's some Brian Wilson, and there's some Dennis Wilson, and there's some Bruce Johnson, and there's 2-3 covers on here. And you got a leftover track from the Smile Sessions. So it doesn't always flow together too well, but I think this is the one that really has Dennis Wilson kind of blossoming into a really cool songwriter. Be With Me and All I Want to Do are really cool. And he gets the writing credit for Never Learn Not to Love, which is the Charles Manson tune. It's actually pretty darn good. I don't know how much Charles Manson wrote and how much Dennis Wilson wrote, or they collaborated or whatever, but Dennis really blossoms on this one. I love his kind of damaged vocals. The lack of perfection, I think, is the big draw. But the rest of his Good Do It Again is kind of trying to reclaim that summer that was like 4 years ago. Like it's weird to talk about them trying to reclaim something that happened only a couple years ago. They go back to the Phil Spector well for I Can Hear Music. And Time to Get Alone was supposed to be written for the pre-Three Dog Night band. I forget what they were called, but you can really kind of hear it. It would sound perfect from them, but it sounds great. Probably even better from the Beach Boys. And then it ends with Essence, which is just insanely just not like anything else ever recorded. It's a waltz time. It's dark. It has this huge chorus with the band like chanting, singing in unison. There's like 5 different parts to it, all on rapid fire. You can kind of tell that it's from those same sessions because it kind of has that same thing as Heroes and Villains and Surf's Up, where it's like a symphony packed into 3 minutes. And there's, 20 different instruments, all with just little parts in it, but they're all arranged perfectly. The vocals are perfect. It's amazing. One of my favorite songs, spoiler alert. But banjo, dobro, trumpet, just what he could pack, him and Van Dyke Parks could pack into like these little 3-minute songs just astounds me to this day, blows my mind. So kind of on the strength of Essence, it ascends above Wild Honey and Friends, but it's like right there. This is a 4.5 stars for me. So we're getting into the big stuff. I love the Beach Boys, so we're 4.5 and 5 stars all the way throughout the rest of the top 10.
All right. My number 7 is going to be Sunflower, which I do like a lot, 4 stars. Apparently they wrote like 48 songs or something for this. And you can kind of tell because like every song on here has really, really strong melodies and they're really hooky and catchy. So I think having such a large pool of material to kind of pull from helped. It came out in 1970, but it is like the most 70s sounding record that you can like imagine. And I love 70s production. Anyone who watches the channel regularly will know that, but there are times on this record where I think it goes even like a little too far into some like 70s cliches, even like sounds like the beginning of like some kind of like 70s TV show or like a TV theme for some of these tracks. So I think the production is a little overdone. Regardless, I think every track is very strong melodically and very memorable. I think the highlights for me are the Bruce Johnston tunes. Deirdre and Tears in the Morning, I think, are great. I also really like Forever. I think it's a great love song. Really beautiful, great vocal from Dennis. And even the fact that Uncle Jesse sang it to Rebecca on Full House, even that can't ruin the song for me. I think it's really good. So Sunflower, number 7.
Well, Rebecca or Lori Loughlin is in jail now, I believe, so it did not last forever. Great show. Giants, baby. Remember the episode when the Beach Boys were on it and they played live with the cast of Full House? All right, my number 7 is going to be Summer Days and Summer Nights. My last 3.5 stars. Then we're getting into 4-star great territory. A little different sound, open, horns. Yeah, I think this is very similar to Beach Boys today, but everything's just elevated, a little more professional. Songwriting's a little better. And then you finally get like California Girls, which I think is like in the same vein as Don't Worry Baby. I like Don't Worry Baby more, but it's like the first kind of like really, really great out of their comfort zone style of songwriting. I think the lyrics on this album are substantially better than Beach Boys today. I don't have a problem at all with Girl from New York City or Amusement Parks USA. I like their little twist on Then He Kissed Me, and You're So Good to Me is probably the star of the show for me here. The only thing that stops it from 4 stars is I'm Bugged at My Old Man. I don't know why. I just can't stand that song for some reason. It seems like they should have been done with that song for some reason. Like, should have been on an older album. It seems like they started to mature, but they're holding on to that. I don't know. For some reason, I've just never liked it. But yeah, I think everything is starting to get slightly more experimental. They're getting a little more creative with their arrangements and textures with their songs. So yeah, 3.5 stars at number 7, Summer Days and Summer Nights.
Well, I agree with Kramzer in this respect. It is my 7th as well. 5 at 4.5 stars. This is their 9th album coming after Beach Boys Today, which this is where I disagree with Kramzer. I think it's a step back in terms of complexity, depth of lyrics. Brian Wilson kind of gets a little more sunny, a little more obvious, back with Amusement Park USA, Salt Lake City, Girl from New York City, kind of trying to bring back the fun a little bit, which is fine. Love the fun. I think California Girls is their first like perfect fun pop song. I think Don't Worry Baby, not quite fun. I think that was their perfect first perfect song, but the peppy bass line, the up-tempo keys is perfect. The backing vocals, phenomenal. And you got Let 'Em Run Wild, which comes right after. Great, just awesome song. Love Brian's vocals on there, like super high in the chorus with that Let 'Em Run Wild, just kind of piercing almost, but very unique. A little bit of the longing and the yearning in that one. And you got the horns, the tempo block drums, the multiple piano parts. Definitely complex there. But I think in general, not quite as complex or interesting as Beach Boys Today, which I have higher on my list. A little more basic pop, a little more surf rock, a little more, hey, let's have fun in the sun. Still great. Kind of, I agree. Unbudget My Old Man isn't great. And Amusement Park USA, I could do without. But pretty much everything else works for me. It's 26 and a half minutes or so. And I would barely change a thing. I think it's one of their best summer fun records. So yeah, 4.5 stars. Going number 7, Summer Days and parentheses Summer Nights.
My number 6 is Surfer Girl, which I think is where they go from like being a really good, really fun surf band to being like the greatest vocal group of all time. And they do it, they shift away a little bit from like the rock and roll of the early records towards a lot of like Brian's doo-wop influences. They have a lot of these like kind of like waltzy ballads like Surfer Girl, In My Room, Your Summer Dream, The Surfer Moon. And I don't know, the vocal performances on all of these tracks are just absolutely unbelievable. The vocal arrangements are so good. I absolutely love it. And I think the upbeat, more fun tracks are really good too. You have Catch a Wave, Little Deuce Coupe, and Hawaii on this, which are all really good. I just think it's really solid, just really, really great singing all the way through it. So love it for that. My number 6.
My number 6 is going to be Surfin' USA. Hell of a pop record. Really puts a stamp on their sound. Yeah, it's the surf album. It's awesome. Surfin' USA is a great song. And they are without a doubt, I think, the best vocal group of all time. I'm with Jason. But this one's full of instrumentals and they're pretty awesome because it just, you can't think of surfer rock without thinking of this album. It is clearly one thing and it created vibes and guitar tones and sounds that people always relate to this album, to the Beach Boys, and still do to this day. Stoked is absolutely so cool. Love Surf Jam and Let's Go Trippin' towards the end. Finders Keepers is kind of a cool little way to end the album. Lonely Sea I like a lot, especially when he does that little tears in my eyes, sort of like confessional aside moment. That's really cool. So I think this one is just a plain, good old-fashioned, quick, to the point, fun pop record with style. I mean, it's just got so much character and life to it. So awesome. So 4 stars. Number 6, Surfing USA.
Okay, my number 6 is going to be All Summer Long. I think this is their first great album. It falls a little short of perfection. I have it 4.5 stars, but it doesn't get much better than kicking off an album with I Get Around and then going right into All Summer Long, just one of the great summer tunes ever written. It's still sun, surf, motor scooters, summer, girls, simple, fun, California beach, but I think the vocals just almost perfect throughout. I think I like it better in mono than stereo. There's something kind of more interesting about the mono mix to me. So I tried to listen to the mono stuff for the earlier albums until maybe like Surf's Up, but I think the mono kind of the way all their voices kind of combine, which is really cool sounding. You got Hushabye, which is a cover, but nobody could ever do it like the Beach Boys. Little Honda's fun. And I think Brian sounds amazing on We'll Run Away, which I think is sort of like a descendant of Wouldn't It Be Nice. Drumming on this album's fun. I think they started to use a bunch of session artists. Hal Blaine is on this one. So, there's a little more complexity to the backing tracks and stuff. I think it's just real close to perfect. Maybe their best mix of just like artistry and pure, sunny, like fun. So yeah, it's 4.5 stars, and just a really great, fun 25 minutes.
All right, my number 5, as you guys predicted, pretty high up on my list. I have Carl and the Passions, So Tough. Like you guys also said, the first with Blondie Chaplin and Ricky Fattar. Really a different sound with these guys in the band. Kind of like a Crosby, Stills and Nash, Traffic, and a little of the band in there too, maybe. So it's very far from their early like surf rock pop stuff that they did, but kind of also keeping it in California, kind of more of like a Laurel Canyon kind of sound on this, which I like a lot. I think the songs on this are mostly really, really good. It was really neck and neck between this and the record that I have ahead of it. I just think the one I placed ahead of it is a little more consistent. There's a few tracks on here that I don't love, like He Comes Down. All This Is That, I think is an okay song, but I don't think it fits in with the rest of the material on this record at all. But the highlights are among my favorite post-Pet Sounds Beach Boys songs. Here She Comes and Hold On, Dear Brother are both just fantastic songs. Really love those, but I think my number 4 is in a similar vein, but better throughout.
Yeah, I think once you get past Pet Sounds, the band is the one they sound like the most a lot, especially in like some of like Carl's vocals. He sounds like he's literally like on stage fright or something at times. Who's probably the most underrated Beach Boy to me. I think all of them are great singers, but I think he can kind of do those solo, like painful, emotional style vocals probably better than all of them. My number 5 is going to be All Summer Long. Joe had a great review of it a few minutes ago. I've got it at 4.5 stars. Yeah, like you said, perfect blend. Maybe their best example of artistry meets pop when they're starting to make that transition. I Get Around, amazing leadoff track, All Summer Long. So simple, just a list of things they do in the summer. Apparently, they're big fans of mini golf. I think they bring that up quite a bit, which is just awesome. Little Honda is great. Wendy is amazing. I think Do You Remember is just a really cool homage to rock legends, which I really dig. Girls on the Beach, Drive-In, all of these just like simple like lifestyle songs. Very easy. I mean, that's what pop is really supposed to be, is just, easy, attainable, feel good, catchy music. Not necessarily feel good, but Little Honda, I think I mentioned. Yeah, there's just nothing wrong with this album other than the fact that they have a little bit more creative juice in the tank that they need to get out. But yeah, this is as good as it gets for pop music at the time. So All Summer Long, 4.5 stars at number 5.
Okay, my number 5, probably going to be Jason's number 4. I got Holland. It's 5 stars for me. I absolutely love this album. I think it's quite close to perfect. I know 5 stars is the highest you can get, but it's like a little lower 5 stars than the upper 5 stars of the later Beach Boys albums I'll have. But I think Blondie, Chaplin, and Ricky Fattar are more integrated on this. I like that Blondie takes lead vocals on Sail On Sailor, which was written by Brian Wilson and Van Dyke Parks and some other people. So it's kind of out of his normal, like, the band style vocals that he brought to Carl and the Passions. But on this, you got the Blondie Chaplin leads, and you have Carl and some of the Beach Boys doing backup. So you kind of get that integrated mix of like, okay, this is like a new sound for the Beach Boys. I think it's their best like FM radio, 70s classic song. Really great. I just love the coda, the Sail On Sailor, just over and over, which they do really well. Those codas are always just so gorgeous. And I think Dennis, strong on this one. You got Steamboat and Only With You, both great songs. I think Carl really, he'd done good stuff before, so I don't want to denigrate Carl. But on this one, he really just breaks through with The Traitor, which is maybe like his Surf's Up, his masterpiece. 5 minutes, really just immersive production, soulful backing vocals. And then it kind of transforms into like this just showcase for Carl at the end. Really powerful, just soulful, masterful vocals on this one. Really love that song. You'll probably see it again on my top 10. And even something, you got Chaplin and Fatar kind of teaming up for Leaving This Town, which sounds like a more earnest version of something you'd find off like Can't Buy a Thrill, without the sarcasm in it, but real kind of just pretty 70s gold kind of song. I just think everything on here is great. Even the California Saga with Big Sur, Beaks of Eagles, which got a little spoken verse in there, which I'm not crazy about. That's really the only thing that kind of holds it back from being a perfect album in my mind. But California, which kind of brings back the bass line from California Girls, makes it new again, is cool. And Big Sur, sort of an Americana, pretty song. And I think just everything on here is just really good. Leaving This Town's good. Funky Pretty's good. Just a really good, strong album that most people don't talk about. I don't think most people even know that it's a Beach Boys album, but I think it's phenomenal and definitely the biggest riser from where I had it before we started this listography to now. So yeah, all the way in the top 5, baby.
Yep, that is my number 4. That was a great summary of the record. A lot of what I have written here is exactly what Joe said. It's like the lineup that's on So Tough, but it lands somewhere like between So Tough and the sound of like Sunflower. It's very 70s, but there's more of that Beach Boys sound, and I think that comes mostly from the backing vocals, more of that than there is on So Tough. So it's a really good middle ground, and I think the songwriting is just really consistent throughout it. There's no real skippable tracks, and like Joe said, there is that weird spoken word thing, but I think that is like more interesting weird than off-putting weird. So it doesn't bother me, and the highlights on it are so good. Big Sur, I love. Leaving This Town, Only With You, and Sail on Sailor are all just top-notch songs for me. Really good. I've got it at 4.5.
All right, my number 4, I've got it 4.5 stars for 2020, and I'm definitely getting vibes of the band on this one, not just from Carl, but just like in the general, just like Clubhouse Boys feel, just kind of like that, a little bit of like a jovial nature to it. Do It Again is great. I love I Can Hear Music. Yeah, not really a bad song on here. Cabin Essence, like Joe said, is such a unique piece, especially to end the album. Cotton Fields is great. I really, really like, didn't make my songs list as a spoiler, but Never Learn Not to Love, very soulful. Like you're getting that like R&B soul that started over in Wild Honey and getting up here. And this one is actually Dennis. Sounds just like Richard Manuel from Music from Big Pink on here. When he especially does the closer, like sounds, it has like the same accent and like cadence and everything. It's really awesome. The sound on this, I think, is probably the best of that era, especially on songs like Nearest Faraway Place. I think very underrated production on this. Be With Me is lovely, especially with the horns they bring in. The bass on Bluebirds is just phenomenal. Yeah, I think it's just, I Can Hear Music, I think, is, a stud of a song. But other than that, I don't think there's just quite the track to make it a 5-star album, but it's friggin' close. So 2020, and I did not hear this before doing this listography. Obviously, I'd heard I Can Hear Music before, but yeah, really blew me away. 2020, 4th place, 4.5 stars.
Okay, top 4. This is where it gets really tough for me because I love all 4 of these. They all made my top 5 somewhere down the line in the albums of the year. But my 4th, and I think the highs of this one are right there with Pet Sounds as far as just beautiful, like direct from the hand of God to Brian Wilson. But there's, like you guys both said, a couple of flaws to this guy. I got Surf's Up. I think it's a flawed, uneven masterpiece. I have it at 5 stars, mostly just because the best of it is just so incredible. But I agree with you guys. The political stuff, student demonstration time, it just doesn't really work. Probably shouldn't have tried to shoehorn that one in. Take a load off your feet's kind of silly, and I don't mind that one so much. Don't go near the water is okay. And Looking at Tomorrow, Welfare Song, it's okay. I mean, none of those songs are gonna like make my top 50 Beach Boys songs, but I don't think they wreck the flow, like Jason said in his review. And the tracks like Long Promised Road, Disney Girls, which is probably Bruce Johnson's best contribution to the Beach Boys. Feel Flows, really where Carl just busts out and is like, hey, I'm a great songwriter too. Between that and Long Promised Road, two of Carl's strongest songs. And then you got Till I Die and Surf's Up, which just back-to-back marvels. Surf's Up might be the most complex, beautiful song ever written, although God only knows might be better. But as far as like complexity, I think Surf's Up even more impressive between the incredible vocals, the way it transforms in the outro coda section, just the vocals coming out of every single, space around you, just a completely immersive experience. It has one of my favorite piano parts ever, in the coda part, where it's just like this run down the scale, just contrapuntal with the high, beautiful vocals. Gives me chills, makes me cry. It's one of the best vocal arrangements ever put on tape. And the rest is pretty good too. I mean, I think Long Promised Road, Feel Flows kind of hold up their end of the bargain. Day in Life of Tree is weird, but interesting. It's probably the most flawed an album can get before I'll knock it down to like 4.5, 4 stars. But just sort of the highs just put it over the top for me. So yeah, it's a 5-star. It's really weird, but I love it. Surf's Up, 5 stars. Number 4.
All right, top 3. And my number 3 is going to be All Summer Long. And like you guys said, it's just like the perfect like middle ground between the pop genius, later Brian Wilson stuff, and the early fun summer beach stuff. Just really great. And like I said, like on Surfer Girl, just the vocals on this are just like breathtakingly beautiful. It's so amazing. Immaculately produced as well, bringing in different sounds on this record that they haven't really experimented with yet. There's like xylophone and piccolo, and it's getting more orchestral. Even on like the more upbeat rock songs like Little Honda, it's easy to kind of like not notice or take for granted how good the singing is, but like even the background vocals on a track like that are just absolutely unbelievable. So yeah, for me, Beach Boys, the best vocal blend in pop history. I think the way their voices just fit together is just unmatched by anyone else in the history of pop. And I've got this one at 4.5 stars.
My number 3, 4.5 stars for Wild Honey. I cannot believe Jason had this at number 19. It blows my mind. Love how raw and like newly soulful with the R&B in it, but really the soul, not just the genre or style of soul, but they're really getting soulful here. It is really awesome. You get the honky tonk feel with the piano a little bit and stuff. Carl Wilson on the opening track is just like pouring his heart out. Like they're really just getting into raw emotion on this album, which I think is the star of the show. You're getting the vibes of the band again, like I already talked about. Also starting to get a little bit risque, like not worrying about being too polished for the public. I mean, like with I'd Love to See You Once, you get like the line at the end where I'd love to see you once in the nude, which probably wouldn't have flown with them back in like 62, 63 or whatever, but now they're going for it. They're growing up. Here Comes the Night is really cool with those sparky little like pop chorus punches, especially in like the Hold Me, Squeeze Me part. Really getting into like new sides of their character too. Let the Wind Blow is great. I Was Made to Love Her. I love the little pieces like Country Air, a thing or two. I think this album just screams just like inventive. I feel like it's them. Pet Sounds obviously was incredibly creative with a vision and everything, but this one I think is like some of them just getting down to what they want to get down to, very personal in a sense that way, with all of them, not just Brian, with the other albums. But yeah, I think this is just absolutely phenomenal, very close to 5-star. But as Joe said, how she boogalooed it, I don't like at all. Doesn't fit on the album, not good on its own. So that kind of hurts it for me. And I get some of Jason's point where like some of the songs need to be flushed out and rounded off a little bit more. But for what they got down, it's really awesome. 4.5 stars. Number 3, Wild Honey.
It's interesting, I think, that you bring up the band on that, when that actually came out a year before Big Pink. And it's crazy, like going through these records, like they put out so many records that you're like, this is still from the 60s. This is like their 20th album or something. Like, yeah, it's like it always seems later than it actually was. Like you think like, oh, I'm into like the late period now, but it's still like 67.
Yeah, I think there's more albums that are ahead of their time. Not that the band heard this album and were like, that's it, that's what we're gonna do when we release this. But I mean, yeah, they don't get enough credit for influencing other artists around them, I'd say, and I will talk about that pretty soon for sure.
I'm looking forward to it. My number 3, I'm serious. Why? I'm being earnest. My number 3, Sunflower, 1970, their 16th album, like you guys were just discussing. 16 albums, and we're only into 1970. So, yeah, their output was ridiculous. Already covered a whole heaping load of genres and styles. And this is, like Jason said before, their like 70s, most 70s album. Sort of Brian's, he was still writing songs, like half of these songs at least are Brian Wilson contributions. But I think at this point he was like completely just like songed out vegetable somewhere. So he didn't have as much to do with the sound as the previous albums. So I believe Carl's kind of like the de facto band leader at this point, and he does a bunch of vocals. He doesn't have that many songwriting leads. It's mostly Dennis and Brian. And I think Dennis really brings this kind of into the 70s. Right from the beginning, Slip On Through, you kind of have this R&B groove, but it's like a rock song, a little psychedelic groove in there. You still have the classic Beach Boys harmonies and vocals, but there's a little more rock, I think, behind it. Like, that's courtesy of Dennis, who's really bringing his style to the forefront here. Same with on Got to Know the Woman and It's About Time, which has a pretty rockin' guitar solo for the Beach Boys. Definitely remember the first time I heard this album, I was like, is this still the Beach Boys? Like it doesn't quite sound like anything else in their catalog, which is cool. A lot of different contributors. Tears in the Morning and Deirdre from Bruce Johnson, sort of little like more 60s leaning kind of cutesy songs, but I think they work well on this. He did Disney Girls, so he kind of likes those throwback, like real 60s, late 50s kind of cutesy tracks, but they work here. Brian Wilson, bunch of good songs. Our Sweet Love, Cool Cool Water, which is kind of a cool, not even like a real song, just sort of like a feeling. So Brian Wilson's still there, but he's not quite the creative forefront, I guess, as he was, as producing the sound and guiding the band through the recording process. But I think it's just a really good team effort from everybody. Everybody's at the top of the game. The songs are still complex. The harmonies are still complex. Forever and Our Sweet Love, extremely complex. Could fit on, Pet Sounds or Surf's Up or a whole bunch of different albums. So I think it's just a really kind of miracle that they pulled it off. Like Jason said, they recorded like 48 songs. They're trying to get a hit. Critics loved it. Audiences completely ignored it. So they didn't succeed in getting themselves a hit record, but I think they made a pretty much masterpiece. So yeah, it's 5 stars for me. Sunflower. Yeah, I'm number 3.
So Joe and I have the same top 2. And I would guess that we have them in the same order, probably. My number 2 is the Beach Boys Today. So this is the record they made right after Brian stopped touring with the band and decided he was kind of just going to stay home and work on the records. And you get some different subject matter on this. They kind of break away from the beach and car themes, and it gets more elaborate. The song structures get more complex. The harmony and the chords that are chosen are a little bit more advanced. It's getting a bit more orchestral, and I think it's a little more carefully considered how the record is sequenced. You got all of the like fun upbeat tracks in the beginning, and the more sort of like reflective, quieter numbers in the second half, and that was done intentionally. And I usually hate that, especially when it's like the rock half and the acoustic half. But here I think it works because it's not that. I think you still have a lot of the same kind of orchestration happening throughout all of the tracks. So actually, until I read the fact that it was intentionally separated that way, it didn't really even dawn on me. I just think it works nicely the way it's sequenced. And yeah, it's great. It's, to me, the precursor, even though there's a couple records in between, this is like the actual precursor to Pet Sounds. This is, him heading in that direction. They take a step back with the next couple, but to me, it's some of the most brilliant pop songwriting of the 60s.
All right, my number 2 is Sunflower, and I've got it at 5 stars. And for 1970, it is ridiculously ahead of its time. If you watch our channel and watch the Album of the Year series, I think every decade, starting with when I picked Psycho Candy by Jesus, Mary Chain to Win in 85, I have referenced, this sounds a little bit like the Beach Boys, or they're influenced by the Beach Boys, because this album in particular, and obviously all of our number ones, was incredibly influential. This album just like pretty much invented dream pop and like a little bit of like shoegaze and stuff. Like all those great acts that we nominated, or I nominated and liked, and like from like 2009 to like 2014 era, like Girls and stuff like that. And they just pretty much like a newer style of Sunflower to me. Like that's that dream indie pop vibe, hazy, like chill wavy kind of. It's all over this album, and it's just so good. Probably the only album of the Beach Boys where I think the second half is better. Maybe I'll double check that. But yeah, I love the first half. You get Slip On Through, like Joe said, like you get that cool bass on it, and This Whole World is great. Deirdre is amazing. And then the second half is almost as good as anything on Pet Sounds. It starts with Tears in the Morning, which is awesome. All I Want to Do, I absolutely adore. Forever, Our Sweet Love, At My Window, Cool Cool Water. Probably too long for them at 5 minutes to close out a Beach Boys album, but it's it's really masterful with the mood, and everyone's involved at the top of their game with the songwriting. It's just kind of like haunting and gorgeous. I love the ideas on here. The little production touches are so nice. You don't think of it as like being their production masterpiece because they kind of rein it in, but man, it is just a gem of an album. I don't remember even bringing it up in 1970 Album of the Year video, because probably got 11 5-star albums from 1970. I mean, we beat that horse to death with just, we can't talk about everything in the 70s because it's the 70s, but I don't think any of us nominated it, but maybe Joe did. Well done, sir. Excellent, excellent album. 5 stars. Number 2, and it would be interesting if Pet Sounds didn't exist, if we would be talking about the Beach Boys legacy. To me, in my opinion, since I have it at number 2, with Sunflower kind of being the same. But as Joe mentioned, the public was just like, I don't want anything to do with this. I think maybe that might be because by 1970, like heavier, harder rock was really seeping in. So that might have a little something to do with it. But this deserves much more praise and recognition than it gets. Number 2, Sunflower.
I totally agree with that, Kramzer. I do believe it doesn't get enough credit, and I blame the public for their stupidity. I guess at that point, the Beach Boys were just painfully uncool. Like, they were a 60s surf group. They were not a progressive, forward-thinking R&B rock band. So unfortunately, the public did miss the boat. And yeah, that was close to winning for me in 1970. Only bested by Neil Young's seminal After the Gold Rush. But yeah, I love that album a whole heck of a lot. But I love this one a little bit more. It was my 1965 winner. We got Beach Boys Today. And this is definitely the one Wilson just blossoms, Brian Wilson, that is, blossoms into just a phenomenal, sort of miles ahead of his time songwriter. He started smoking pot, so I guess yay drugs. He brings in the Wrecking Crew to do some of the backing instrumentation, which I think really helps separate them, adds complexity, adds interesting little, just the little things in the background, the depth of the instrumentation. He's using a whole bunch new instruments, bunch of different kinds of piano, grand, upright, tack piano, harpsichords, organs. So he's just putting in all sorts of new stuff, and just the complexity, especially the second half. The first half's fun. Do you want to dance? Great vocals from Dennis Wilson. A lot of fun. Good to My Baby, Don't Hurt My Little Sister, When I Grow Up to Be a Man, Help Me Rhonda, Dance, Dance, Dance. All kind of peppy, upbeat, surprisingly deep though, and complex. Even in those songs, you can hear a little bit of Brian Wilson kind of experimenting with mood on some of those. And then side two is really where it's like, okay, this is the precursor, like Jason said, to Pet Sounds. This is like the trial run for what Brian's going to do on Pet Sounds. Even something like Kiss Me Baby, which, it sounds really just kind of simple and shallow, but just the vocal arrangements, a little doo-wop, the contrapuntal between the low and the high, singing different things, the slightly Baroque instrumentation, just really sounds like something you'd hear on Pet Sounds. Same with She Knows Me Too Well, which could definitely fit on Pet Sounds. Sort of, Brian thinking a little bit more about relationships and how things work, and not just being like, she's breaking up with me. And the simplicity of their early work is gone. Same with In the Back of My Mind, which has great vocals from Dennis. There's doubt and misgiving, and sort of just, an extra layer on all the vocals, and the instrumentation just totally backs it up. Like, if you didn't have both, I don't think this album would be nearly as successful. But I think the fact that they both evolved at the same time really brings it all out. The different percussion, the minor and major key changes, and the harmonies being a little just different, a little more complex. It's just also great. I'm going to pretend Bull Session with Big Daddy doesn't exist and isn't a real track, because that's really the only thing that isn't perfect about this album, but it's still a masterpiece in my opinion. It's a 10 out of 10, 5 stars, 65 winner. And yes, the precursor to all of our number ones, Pet Sounds, which Jason's going to talk about right now.
Yeah, it is my number one. We got a trifecta, and it is my number one because it is the best album. Not the best Beach Boys album. It is the best album. It is my favorite album that has ever been made. To me, it's the most harmonically rich and rewarding pop music that's ever been made by anybody. And when I say harmonically, I'm not just talking about the vocal harmonies. It's the chords, it's the texture of the instruments, it's Brian's work in the studio, the amazing musicians that played on it, the Wrecking Crew, Hal Blaine, Carol Kay, Glenn Campbell, all these people. But you can people really geek out over this record and talk about music theory and the studio so much, but all of that is nothing if it's not for the way that it feels. It's just the way this music makes me feel is unlike any other record. It kind of makes me nostalgic for a time that I didn't even live through. And I don't know, it's just full of all of that teenage yearning. And there's just this melancholy that runs under everything. Even the happiest songs on the record are kind of sad. And I just think it's unbelievable. 5 stars, 5+ stars for Pet Sounds.
Yep, Pet Sounds is number 1, 5 stars. We all picked it in 1966, the only time that ever happened, and rightfully so. It's not my favorite album ever. It's my top 10. Depending on your definition of pop, it is my favorite pop album of all time. Jason hit the nail on the head. You can talk about the composition, you know, being really progressive for pop and sort of creating more progressive pop movements and all the little details in the production. But the thing here is just this underlying like melancholy, great, perfect term for it, that is just Brian Wilson, like to a T. It's just really it's a smile and a tear at the same time. It's like this recognition of beauty in front of you that is just not going to last. And that's kind of the feeling I get when I listen to this whole thing. And I think the lyrics are just absolutely sensational. And I think it's a really lonely record when you really start to think about it, as joyous and sunny as it is and how pretty the harmonies are. It's a lot about Brian just kind of not feeling his plate, feeling all of the emotions that everyone else does, but still not feeling part of the group. You get that with like, that's not me, and I just wasn't made for these times and stuff like that. Just really sincere stuff where I don't even think he had any idea that's how he was coming across. It just, what a natural way for songwriting to just pour out, I feel like, for this album. And I don't want to just say, you know, it's his album only, but it kind of is, you know, it's not as much the rest of the Beach Boys. And then you get his passion for music in it too, with like Sloop John B, just like, I'm going to do this song this way and arrange it like this. And we've said it on the channel before, I think God Only Knows is the best song ever written. I think it's just a ridiculous marriage of these like deeply moving, depressing lyrics when you really just read them, with like this just ridiculous orchestral, hopeful arrangement to it. Then you get that bizarrely awesome interlude out of nowhere with the vocals. Can't really say enough. I don't want to talk more about it because it deserves much better than what a schmuck like me has to say for it. So 5 stars. It's Pet Sounds, for God's sakes. It's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, hard for me to add anything to the legend that has already been written about this album and what you both so nicely said. I just, you know, I think it is as good as people say it is. I think it's sort of a cultural touchstone. And really, it's amazing because Brian Wilson set out to like make the best album of all time. You know, after hearing the Beatles, and was like, okay, I'm going to top this. And he did. He wrote the best thing I think that has ever been put to tape, the best music. It might not be my favorite album of all time, but I don't think anything is better than God Only Knows as far as ever in the history of humanity, as far as a song. Maybe might be like a Beethoven. Maybe Beethoven's best could go up against it. But
I would go as far to say that I might think God Only Knows is just my favorite piece of art ever created, including literature, film, paintings, whatever you say. Like, song just moves me to death. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, it can make me cry listening to it. Like, I'm not going to lie to you people out there. It's just something about it just hits so hard. It's like from God's hand, God's mouth to Brian's, however it came to be. Even with, you know, it's the one track that Carl sings lead vocals on. And so it's interesting that Brian gave it to Carl to sing. And just the way it ends with the vocals just ringing out, just chills, man. It's amazing. And the rest of it's pretty much perfect. It's just super complex music. There's just an aura, a feel about it from Brian. Like Krams already said, there's this melancholy that kind of hangs over the whole thing, even in the happier songs, even in a perfect pop radio song like Wouldn't It Be Nice, which might be one of the best, you know, it's probably a top 10 pop, like happy radio song ever written. But there's still like this undercurrent behind it, you know, growing up and sort of leaving behind the sun and the sand and the beach and all those good vibes. So I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's books about this album, so you should probably read that and just listen to it. It's perfect in every way. I wouldn't change a moment. And it's my number one, all our number ones. Yeah, just a masterpiece of music, and remains probably, I mean, it's been 45 55 years since it came out. I don't think anything's going to get better than that. So whatever. You did it, Brian. You made the best. You wanted the best. You got the best.
Come on. Did anyone out there really think it wasn't going to be a Triple Crown? How could you not think we were all going to pick it? Come on. No way.
So Beach Boys overall, how we feeling about them? For me, they're a top 10 act of all time.
I don't go that high. They're definitely top 100, probably a healthy top 100 for me. I don't want to say appreciate and respect them more than I like them, because I like them a lot. Yeah, they're probably in the 40 to 60 range for me, I guess. I think what hurts is just like that era, like the early 60s, their pop is so good. But for like my all-time stuff, a 22-minute fun surf rock album is not going to hold up to even like my third favorite Pink Floyd album or something like that, just because of the overall density, unfairly, because, they weren't in that, album era really yet, but they deserve all the credit. Easily, without a doubt, you got to say the best vocal group ever, no doubt. That's not debatable.
Yeah, I think at their peak, they're my favorite band of all time. I don't think anyone can make a better song or album really than they did. A little uneven. The fact that they have 29 albums maybe hurts them a little bit because there's a whole bunch of stinkers, but they're definitely top 10. I think they're the best pop group of all time. And if I had to choose like one band to listen to forever, it would probably be them. So I think just the depth, the way they kind of adapted throughout the decades puts them ahead of, the Beatles and Zeppelin, obviously perfect, but they have limited numbers of albums. They broke up at the right time. They didn't kind of get to go through the growing pains as much. So I think for just like peak performance, nothing beats the Beach Boys.
I don't know. You could say the Beatles broke up at the right time. I would love to hear one more Beatles album, but.
Well, no, but would you want to hear like 80s Beatles albums, like 90s, really? I don't know. You listen to some of Paul's and George's and Ringo's albums, and I think they broke up right about the right time.
All right. Well, that's maybe a discussion for another day. But everybody, let us know what you think of the Beach Boys. What are your favorite Beach Boys albums? You can do the all 29. You can do a top 10, whatever you're feeling. Be sure to hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already subscribed, and hit the bell for notifications. Check down in the description for links to all of our social media accounts. And we will see you tomorrow for our top 10 favorite Beach Boys songs. Thanks for watching.